Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at the intellectual developments. Last time we left off examining the historical developments with the Medici family and how Florence rises from this relative obscure little town to become one of the cultural centers of Europe. And the Medicis played a big part of that, and also the fall of Rome and Rome's prominence is a factor within that. We took a look at both of those elements last time. Today, I want to take a look at the intellectual developments and how these are also this is also part of the story to the Renaissance. As society, history starts to change, the ideas start to change as well, and these ideas are going to lay a foundation for understanding some of the major elements within the Renaissance art. And so as history changes, as our understanding of ourself changes, it's going to change the way that people create art. And because art is is a window into people's understanding of themselves, right? And so as we take a look at each era is going to have a slightly different understanding of the human condition, and that's going to give a different understanding within art, and we're going to see how that changes and evolves. And so art reflects the world in which it was created, and so we're going to take a look at how the ideas of the Renaissance are going to then be reflected within its art. I wanted to take a look at the past intellectual climate of the Middle Ages as a way of juxtaposing how this is going to be different during the Renaissance. Mainly, I want to take a look at scholasticism. And what scholasticism essentially does is it takes a look at Aristotle's ideas of empirical reasoning. Empirical reasoning generally states that you can use the senses, sight, hearing, touch, taste, right, in order to make sense of the natural world. And the idea that Aristotle concludes is that we can study the natural world through these five senses and be able to develop scientific understanding, right? We can understand cause and effect relationships about the natural world. What happens during the Middle Ages is that Christianity takes that idea of Aristotle and then twists it in a certain way to suggest that you can use the five senses to prove God's existence, and Christianity is the only religion, right? Well, the problem with that is that Aristotle was not a Christian, right? He didn't even know what Christianity was. He was way before Christianity. So Aquinas is changing Aristotle's ideas to reach his own conclusion. And so Thomas Aquinas in Summa Theologica, which is the summary of theology, takes a look at scholasticism. He uses scholasticism and to try to prove the existence of God and Christians, right? And the other problem with this is that Christians then use, or the Catholic Church specifically, uses scholastic ideas, or Thomas Aquinas' ideas here, as a way to justify going off to the Crusades. And the idea was, we're going to try to prove to you that our God is the only God, and we're going to prove to you that Christianity is the superior religion. And if you don't agree with it, well, then we're going to then kill you. And so the Crusades was part of that kind of misapplication of Aristotle's ideas. But what we see within this, the Middle Ages didn't really see outside Christianity. They thought that Christianity was the only way in which you can really see the world, and that uses that lens to try to apply to everything, even if it doesn't necessarily apply, right? And so it's problematic from a number of ways. What we see during the late Middle Ages is there was a demand to separate the thought of humans from the thought of God. Separating the philosophy of humans from the theology of God, right? And so there's that movement, and the Renaissance picks up on that movement and carries forward with it. And so the study of God is going to be considered theology, and the study of humans is going to be humanitatis, which is the Latin for the humanities, right? So the study of human develop. And here you see Cronach's Adam and Eve, which is the Renaissance's kind of taking a look at what is it about us that distinguishes us from other beings of creation. We'll take a look at Mirandola's Oration on the Dignity of Man, taking a look at this specific moment and what makes us so unique. And so he's going to take a look at the old ideas of the ancients, and he's going to then apply them within kind of a Christian understanding, somewhat similar to scholasticism, but very different. So I want you to be able to distinguish what are the differences between what scholasticism is seeking to do and what the humanists are seeking to do during the Renaissance. One of the foundational writers for the humanities of the Renaissance was a medieval, late Middle Age poet named Petrarch. Petrarch was once a member of the clergy of the Catholic Church, and he went to church one day, and he saw a very beautiful woman sitting in the back of the pew. And he thinks to himself, what am I doing being a priest? So he gives up his vows, and he says, this is not the life for me. And then he starts pursuing, her name was Laura. He starts pursuing Laura, and he dedicates the rest of his life to writing poetry. And so again, we talked about in the Middle Ages that the only people that were educated, or the main people that were educated, were going to be the clergy. And so he uses those ideas, right? His ability to write, his ability to understand Latin, to focus on using those ideas within writing. But he's one of the main leaders, kind of the father of humanism, father of the Renaissance, to separate the idea of religion from the study of human beings. And he's mainly concerned with humanity's place in the universe. And what he does is he uses classical writings to formulate his ideas on humanity. Using philosophy, he concludes that humanity is the center of study. And the secular realm is important, right? It's not just that we should just be on our knees praying all day, but God created us and give us in these bodies to be able to then make sense of it. And so human beings are worthy enough to study. We don't just have to study necessarily religion all the time. Here's what he says. I love this particular poem because he talks about love here. And the love here is not necessarily, it's not a divine love. It's a natural world, right? Rather than showing this kind of repugnance for, natural feelings, he suggests that there is value to them because, after all, God gave them to us. And so let's explore what they are and what they mean. Here he's talking about love. He says, I find no peace and have no arms for war. My jailer opens not, nor locks the door, nor binds me to hear, nor will loose my ties. Love kills me not, nor breaks the chains I wear, nor wants me living, nor will grant me ease. I have no tongue and shout. Eyeless I see. I long to perish, and I beg for aid. I love another, and myself I hate. Weeping I laugh, I feed on misery, by death and life so equally dismayed. For you, my lady, am I in this state. And so rather than taking a look at these, the feelings of love and connection and desire, he suggests that there could be some value to that. There could be something there that's important to study. And taking a look, another major development during this time with a focus on humanities was this course of study, right? The course of study within the humanities itself. And what the humanities emphasized, at least during the Renaissance, was, number one, focused on moral philosophy, the ideas of right and wrong, or what we would consider ethics today, right? What is the moral right thing to do, and why is that morally right? Not just based on tradition, or that's just the way it is. What makes something, right, the right decision? What are the principles behind it? Is it because it's the right decision because God wants you to do it? Is it the right decision because it's the best for the community? What makes something right or wrong, right? And getting away a little bit from just doing things blindly because tradition tells you to. The second course of study within the humanities was history, studying human courses of events, because humans now can be the center of study. And so let's take a look at what's happened in the past. How does that lead to where we are at today? And then what are some assumptions that we can make about the future? Number 3, what they focused on was grammar. That language, the language of human beings, is important. Because this is how we make sense of the world around us. And rhetoric was number 4. Rhetoric is similar to grammar, right? Studying language, but rhetoric is the study of how do we create arguments? How do we create an idea? And then the 5th thing that they studied, and this gets back to Petrarch, was poetry. The language. This is the application of rhetoric and grammar to make sense of the world around us, to use our philosophical reasoning in order to come to understand what is it that humans are and what do they do, right? But their philosophy centered on the individual role in society and stressed that humans are the center of God's creations. One of the first main developments was in modern Western academia was to study human beings solely in and of themselves. And that's kind of the center of the humanities. And it's also the center of the idea that we talked about of moving this towards secularism, right? Just suggesting that we can understand just the world around us rather than having to then apply that, right, to religious context. And sometimes applying things to a religious context really helps us to kind of strengthen our testimonies. But they're suggesting sometimes you can misapply things, and we have to be cautious with that. One thing that they noticed is that language changes and evolves. And as they studied language more and more, they found that language isn't stagnant. We can take a look at this. If you take a look at, for instance, something that was written in the 1700s or the 1800s, that's going to sound different than something that written in the 20th or 21st century, right? Because the language has changed and evolved. And you can take a look at this even within the Book of Mormon, right? The writings of Nephi are very different. The word choices that he uses, the structure is very different from the language that Moroni uses, right? Because their language has changed and evolved over time as well, right? Humans change and evolve. One individual that I wanted to focus on today was Lorenzo Valla. And what he made was a startling discovery about the donation of Constantine. Constantine, we talked about him before, he was a Roman emperor. And what the donation of Constantine suggests, donation is kind of the giving, kind of power and authority. What the donation of Constantine suggests is that Constantine gave power to the Pope to rule over Western Europe. And so this is where the Pope kind of gets his authority to say, hey, if you are a secular leader, you need to come to me to get my approval, my blessing. And if you don't have that, then you don't have the authority to read or to rule. And what Lorenzo Valla found was that the document, which was found in the 8th century, was forged. The language did not match the date that it was supposed to be written in the 4th century. It actually matched the date when it was found. And so they took a look at this and they said, wait a minute, this could not have been written when you said it was written. And so this is one of the scandals that the Catholic Church has, right? They're forging documents, they're pushing their power, they're overreaching. And this is going to, again, open the doors for our discussion of the Reformation. Because now we see that the Pope doesn't really have, the powers that he says that he does, and it starts to question the Pope's authority. And here's a quote from the donation of Constantine And you can kind of see that. I mean, now as you read this and we kind of go back to it, we can kind of see that the hand of the Pope or the hand of the Catholic leaders kind of pushing this. But it's supposed to have been written by Constantine, but we can kind of tell, today we can kind of see there's a little bit of problems here. But he says, and to the extent of our earthly imperial power, we declare, right, the Roman Empire declare that this Holy Roman Church shall be honored with veneration, and that more than our empire and earthly throne, the most sacred seat of St. Peter shall be gloriously exalted. And so we need to, instead of focusing on the governments and the secular leaders, we need to lift up these Catholic leaders. They're going to be the ones that we need to give our power to, give our authority to, and look to. And this is going to be a large part of the Middle Ages, right? This is kind of this is a good example of that, the Middle Ages, and how everything was supposed to be centered around Christianity. We giving to it the imperial power and dignity of glory and vigor and honor, right? And so it's kind of interesting that we see this, and Lorenzo Valla and the humanists, as they took a look at this, they're like, wait a minute, what does that mean, right? What if this is forged? What else might be forged? What other problems might exist? And the main idea that the humanists are seeking to do is to find the original ideas. They sought to understand the author's intent through investigating the actual readings, the actual documents. They didn't want to be blinded or influenced by mixing church ideas or scholasticism. If writers weren't Christian, they didn't want to be pigeonholed. They didn't want to force on author's ideas to suggest that he's pushing Christianity, for instance, as they did with Aristotle. But what they were seeking to do also is to, quote unquote, liberate the mind, right? And that's a big agenda, or that's a big focus for the study of humanities today, right? To liberate us from past biases and conclusions, not to rely on necessarily tradition for tradition's sake, or the conclusions of the past might be wrong or inaccurate. And I think, questioning the idea of the Pope leads to the Reformation. Questioning ideas in general, I think, is all, again, part of the story of the Restoration, right? Not relying just on things because that's what we've always done, but actually seeking to find ways to see things anew. And I don't want to apply that to too much, right? I'm not trying to do a Thomas Aquinas here, but it's again, I mean, what the humanities is seeking to do is to look at ideas within their original context, to really understand the value of them. And another major development that I wanted to take a look at that brings about these intellectual changes, the intellectual climate of the Renaissance, is the development of Neoplatonism, or New Plato, right? Neo means new, and then the root here is Plato. And ism is just anytime there's like a belief system, like Catholicism or Judaism, right? It's a belief system. And so this is a new appreciation of Plato's ideas. And what happened with this was mainly the fall of Constantinople. Constantinople, we talked about before, the empire, the Roman Empire, dividing into the East and the West. And in the East, it was centered in Constantinople, kind of present-day Turkey. In the West, it was still kind of centered in Rome, although in the West, it wasn't really as organized. Things started to fall apart. People focused more on kind of going back to more of a tribalist kind of way of living. But in the East, it essentially functioned pretty well until the 1400s. They still had a kind of universal kind of a language and a currency system. But what happened was kind of interesting about this is the Ottoman Turks were coming in on the prowl, and they already were conquering areas in Greece and the Balkan Peninsula, and now they're kind of beating down the doors of Constantinople to take over this, the last remnants of the Roman Empire. And interestingly enough, someone accidentally left the gate unlocked at night. So kind of one of those weird historical moments. And the Ottoman Turks said, hey, they left the gate open. Now we don't have to worry about battling over the wall here. We can just kind of sneak in. And so they snuck in and took over. And how that's relevant to the Italian Renaissance is that a lot of the scholars that were in Constantinople took their manuscripts and they fled. They got out and they went to Italy. And so they took these ancient manuscripts, which is exactly what humanists want. We want the actual ancient manuscripts to look at the original intent, so that we're not clouded by misunderstanding or someone's kind of agenda that they're pushing. So they take their manuscripts to Italy, and then mainly the main philosopher that they had was Plato. And so the humanists in Italy were extremely excited about seeing these new manuscripts, and then there's this renewed interest in Plato's ideas. And in fact, 9 years after the fall of Constantinople, Cosimo Medici founds the Platonic Academy in Florence. And so we're going to see. What I want you to do with that kind of information is I want you to apply the ideas of Plato to the artwork that we're going to see, right? So the artists are influenced by these ideas. It's shaping the way that they see the world, and they're going to then create their understanding of the human condition within their art. So I want you to trace how we see humanist thought and how we see Platonic thought in Plato's ideas. I want to just give you a brief overview of Plato's ideas, and so you can see how we, determine how we see this within the Renaissance art. The first idea that we see is Plato suggests that there are two main realms. There's the physical realm and the eternal realm. The physical realm is the realm that is constantly changing, and the eternal realm, or the realm of ideas or the ideal, is constantly static, right? So the example that I like to give is if you have a little puppy, right? That puppy is part of the physical realm. And that puppy is going to, year after year get older and older and bigger, right? But it's going to constantly change as it gets older. But the idea of a dog, right? The idea that a dog has 4 legs and a tail and barks, that's the part of the eternal realm that doesn't change, right? And so he's taken a look at the physical or the eternal, or we can say, maybe spiritual realm. And what he suggests is that we need to forsake the physical realm of changing and focus more on that ideal, the eternal realm, and to try to focus on transitioning towards that ideal. And so what you're going to see is that Michelangelo and Raphael are going to mainly push towards that eternal realm. Within the eternal realm, there are 2 main elements to this eternal realm that are important. One is mathematics. And he argues that mathematics is the language of God, right? So all you mathematicians out there, Plato is the philosopher for you. But what he argues is that 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4, right? So it's that constant, it's not changing, it's fixed. And so what we're going to see is that mathematics becomes extremely central to the art of the Renaissance, right? Because mathematics is the language of God. A lot of the artists are seeking to emulate God within their works. So you're going to see mathematics is going to be central. Another realm or another element within that eternal realm is love, right? And generally, when people talk about Platonic love, they have a misunderstanding of what Plato means by this. What they suggest, or in society, that the common usage of Platonic love is love without physical connectivity, however you want to describe that, intimacy. But that's not the way that Plato saw love, right? So Plato sees love as 2 souls yearning to connect, yearning to transcend the physical realm and to unite in the eternities, right? Does that sound familiar to you, right? It's this highest level of spiritual quality that transcends beyond our physical selves to unite us with the divine, right? And so that essence, right, is what we should aspire to. And so I want you to see whether we see that or not. just to show you how Plato's ideas are still around, I like to give the example of The Notebook. If you guys have seen The Notebook, right? What happens within this, if you haven't seen it, is that you have this couple, and they're now getting older. The wife suffers from dementia, and so she has long periods where she doesn't really understand her surroundings, and then her husband Noah reads the Notebook, right, the story of their lives, to try to help her remember what happened. And so the movie kind of jumps back and forth between how they met and, you know, their initial love story, to more of the contemporary time when they're now old and seeking to try to reconnect. But the film ends on a platonic note, and there's a spoiler alert here. If you haven't seen the film and you're looking to see it, maybe fast forward this portion. But I wanted to show you the ideas of Plato and how prevalent they really are. And this is going to be the last scene when they're together. He's going to sneak into her room at night.
Hi, sweetheart. Sorry I haven't been able to be here to read to you.
And they're both in a nursing home, so he's kind of has to sneak a little time here and there to see her.
Please come back.
What's going to happen when I can't remember anything anymore? What will you do?
I'll be here. I'll never leave you.
I need to ask you something.
What is it, sweetheart?
Do you think that our love can create miracles?
Yes, I do. That's what brings you back to me each time.
Do you think our love could take us away together?
I think our love could do anything we wanted to.
Okay, I'm going to skip forward this. I mean, they're kind of going to go on like this. And then he jumps next to her on the bed. And like, actually doesn't really jump. He's kind of older now. He moves next to her on the bed. And then the nurse comes in and finds them. And they've passed on. And initially, I mean, as my wife saw this, she thought this was a terrible movie because it ends sad, right? Or sadly, that they die, right? And I think the argument, though, is that it's this Platonic argument that their love continues on, even though their physical portion is no longer there. Their spiritual portion, their spiritual kind of unity moves on. So I think in that way, it does become like that happy story, that happy tale. And so I just want to show Nicholas Sparks a lot of the ideas that are out there. I want you to be able to spot how we see these ideas today, that these aren't just ancient ideas or, old ideas that we, several hundred years ago. These are ideas that are still relevant and manifest themselves in different ways. I wanted to leave off by taking a look at Mirandola's oration on the dignity of man. A couple of questions that I want you to think about as we go through some of his ideas. I'm just going to read a couple of quotes here just quickly. I want you to compare Mirandola's version of the creation story to that recorded in Genesis chapter 1, right? What truths does Mirandola find in his version of the creation? And then I want you to contrast, right? So compare and contrast the telling the creation that is recorded, to Mirandola's telling the creation that is recorded in Genesis chapter 1. What differences are there between these two versions? How might this version of the creation reveal a slightly different understanding of humanity? And so take a look at that. Think about that as you're reading through that in the Lamb text. And then number 3, for centuries leading up to the Renaissance, Western civilization considered humans unworthy of admiration due to original sin. And this gets back to that study of Adam and Eve that we started with Cronnick's image that was on the first slide. However, according to Mirandola, humans are worthy of praise and adulation. What qualities does he indicate that we possess that make us admirable? And then 4, Mirandola suggests that we have no limits to our nature. Consider how much control do you believe that we have over our lives? And of course, within the church, we say, we have free agency, and we do. We have the ability to choose right and wrong, right? But let's kind of think about this within, how do we make sense of that with the rest of our life, right? As you think about your schedule, how much control do you have over your college schedule? How much control do you have over it over the fall? How much control do you have over whether you're going to, whether it's going to rain or not, right? So it's a question to consider. How much control do we really have over our lives, and what control do we really have? Let's take a look at a couple of quotes that he says. God the Father, the supreme architect of the universe, built this home, this universe we see all around us, a venerable temple of his Godhead, through the sublime laws of his ineffable mind. And so what we see with Mirandola is he's taken a look at ancient Greek ideas, he's taken a look at ancient Roman ideas, and he's taken a look at ancient Arabic ideas. And that's what the humanists are doing. They're taking a look at the study of languages. And what they are looking for are commonalities. And they suggest that if there are commonalities, these things must be universal truths. And so as he's taking a look at these old documents, this is what he's piecing together. These are the truths that he has come to understand about humanity, right? So what does he say about humanity? And what truths do you think that he has found? What do you agree with? And maybe what do you disagree with? He says, the expanse above the heavens he decorated with intelligences, the sphere of heaven with living eternal souls. Finally, the great artisan, right? That's kind of an interesting way to refer to God. And that's going to be one of the foundational elements of how important art was in the Renaissance. Mandated that this creature would receive nothing proper to himself, shall have joint possession of whatever nature had been given to any other creature. He made man a creature of indeterminate and indifferent nature, and placing him in the middle of the world, right? So this idea that he's created human beings not necessarily out of a fixed form, but something kind of like clay, right? To be able to mold and direct themselves. The great artisan states, Adam, we give you no fixed place to live, no form that is particular to you, nor any function that is yours alone. According to your desires and judgment, you will have and possess whatever place to live, whatever form and whatever functions you yourself choose. You, with no limit or no bound, may choose for yourself the limits and bounds of your nature. We have placed you at the world center so that you may survey everything else in the world. We have made you neither of heavenly nor of earthly stuff, neither mortal nor immortal, so that with free choice and dignity, you may fashion yourself in whatever form you choose. And to you is granted the power contained in your intellect and judgment to be reborn into the higher forms, the divine, right? A couple ideas just to kind of think about, right? So what Mirandola suggests is what separates us from other beings of creation is that when you have, for instance, a squirrel, that squirrel is going to be only what it's going to be, right? It's created to be a squirrel and that's it, right? The difference, though, is that human beings are created to be, they could choose to be either really good or they could choose to be really, really bad. Right? They have that ability, that agency to choose. They could choose to become like God, or they could choose to become like wolves, right? And that's the power that we have, right? We get to determine how we are, right? The main idea, right, the lasting legacy of Mirandola's ideas is he suggests that humans have the freedom of choice, which is different from the Middle Ages. The Middle Ages, Thomas Aquinas suggests that predestination is what rules, right? That God has already, having all knowledge and all power, he puts us into the world to be able to carry out his great plan. And all we are to do as actors, we're kind of pawns in God's game of chess. And we just kind of go about because God knows the end of the results. He knows the cause and the effect. He knows all of the events that are around us and how we're going to respond to them. And so he then controls those responses, right? So he kind of directs human beings. And so human beings don't have free agency per se. They are directed by God in what is known as predestination. Mirandola suggests something different, a different understanding of human beings, that we're not just controlled and manipulated or directed by God. We get the power to choose. And so I want you to think about that, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of similarities that we see with Mirandola's ideas and the church's doctrine. But we also can kind of take a look at how much can we really apply these ideas to all facets of life. If I, for instance, grab an umbrella because it's raining, did I choose to grab an umbrella, or was that choice placed upon me because of the external circumstances that I was given, right? As we think about, people, whether they have the ability to choose or not, right? That they can choose to become whatever they want. Does that mean that anyone can be an NBA star? Or are there certain qualities, biological traits, talents that people are given that make one person different from another, right? So how far can we push Mirandola's ideas of determining our own destiny? What does he exactly mean by that? Well, we'll kind of pick up on that when we get back to our, when we're taking a look at our Zoom and the discussion board for week 2. And then just to kind of leave off, right? The idea is that just kind of summarize Mirandola's ideas that humans are the center of God's creation. We're fashioned after the image of God, and we have the free will to choose our destiny. So what I want you to do is as we turn our attention now to art, I want you to be able to see, how do we see these ideas, the study of humanities, the study of Plato's ideas, the understanding that Mirandola suggests. How do we see these ideas starting to influence and shape artists and how they understand the world?